at once. So for this session, I will not use any of the templates from PPT. I'll just directly show you from the AS400 screen. Okay. So first of all, for creating any SQLRPGLE, you'll have to mention the source type as SQLRPG over here, and then a DDS source will open up. Okay. Now in SQLRPG, what happens is we have to embed the SQL statements. So as you can see, this is a fixed format one. Sorry, this is not a fixed format. This where it is. It's a fixed format one. So first of all, I'll show you what's the syntax of writing a fixed format as embedding SQL. Okay. So it starts with the C spec and a slash symbol is there, a forward slash symbol. Then we write exec SQL keyword and then the SQL statement. And after that, while ending this statement, we again write the end exec keyword. Now what happens is whenever we use SQL to fetch a record from any file, then you'll have to use an into keyword in the select section and the host variables where the values will be returned. And then you can use these variables as usual in your rest of the program logic. So since we are using a colon symbol over here, that's why we are referring these variables as host variables, since they are capable to hold any values that are returned from any SQL statement. So since you have seen this is an example of an fixed format SQL, now like in normal RPG, you can include a set of logic from a different member by using the include keyword or a copy keyword for copy books. Like that in SQL RPG, we have this include, which can be written within the exec SQL statement. And this should be the member name. And in this case as well, the member should not be compiled, which we'll be using inside any program. And is this program as a whole will be compiled. So what I've done here is I have included a member. I've written a member which is in the same format of exec SQL and end exec. And within that, I'm including a SQL statement. And the host variables which I have used here are defined in the source program, where we'll be including this member. So this is a method to include any SQL statements into your program if you require. And apart from that, coming up for the compiler directives. So in RPG, normal RPG, we have this HSpec, or in free format, we write CTL-OPT to mention what are the header specs. And these are the compiler directives. Compiler directives as in whenever you try to compile it, taking 14, and if you take an F4 option, these are the attributes which are known as compiler directives. So basically we specify these things itself in the source member. So how it is done, here you can see the example. Now in this source member, I have not used any of the header spec here. So we are setting up the compiler directive by using this syntax, which is exec SQL and set option. Now this is a free format code. Here we haven't used any C spec as such. So in a free format code, you can directly write exec SQL and no need to write an end exec after the statement. So in this compiler directive setting section, you can see that I have used this attribute of commit as star none, which I'll explain later. And apart from that, the header spec section, which I usually write, is to specify the compilation to happen based on the source statements. That is, if the source member carries this line in the line number 10, then the object will also have this particular statement in the line number 10 itself, and setting up the default activation group as no here itself. Now, this is how we set the compiler directive in an SQL RPGLE. Now, using of the special registers in a SQL program. Okay, I am For that, I have written a sample SQL program. This is the one. So here you can see, rather than mentioning this header spec in the compilation option, I've just specified it in the header spec itself. And the rest of the attributes I have mentioned in the compiler directive set section. So it won't cause any harm. You can specify like this as well. So in the interactive session, as I have shown that we were accessing the special registers or the system registers by using values keyword, values and then any register name like current date or user or time. So this can be specified in the program like this, the same. So here you can write values and the special register name, and then the into keyword will appear here, and after that a host variable which will carry the value which will be returned from this special register. Okay, and the another format for specifying this thing is using a set keyword. Now, rather than using values, you can just use a set keyword and the host variable name, and then substitute the value of the special register that you want to use. So if we'll take this program in debug, and go by each step, then you can see the session user value has been means it has substituted, it has been substituted into the host variable char var. If I'll take an F11 here, you can see it has the session username. Similarly, for the values format, you can see the now is a timestamp function, as I've told in the sessions previously taken, and the same will be substituted into this variable if we just execute this statement. It's a timestamp. Similarly, the rest of the special registers has been used either by using set or by using value. You can see the value of the date here. And I've told the usage of varchar format that it will have to specify a format here which we need to use in our host means in the rest of the program logic. Then the same will be substituted in the host variable in the format. And all these are the same that I have already talked about in the interactive SQL section for special registers. So I'll just hit an F12 to process all. So this is how you can access the system variables in uh, your SQLRPGLE program. Now the next will be a different ways of executing any SQL statement in a program. So I'll first show you the sample. So in order to execute any SQL statement, what you can do is you can either directly provide that statement by using an exec SQL and use the into keyword and the host variable you can mention where the result will be stored out of the select command. So this is first way, means one of the ways. And next up is you can use a string rather than directly using a SQL statement, and that will be suppose I want to do a delete operation on something. So I'll first take a string variable and I'll just substitute the statement that I want to use, and then we can prepare that string variable. Preparing is just allowing it to be converted into an executable statement, and then we use the execute keyword to execute that statement. Now this is an example of a dynamic SQL statement where we are allowing it to have a variable, means a runtime value to be stored in the condition uh, conditional uh, place of the SQL statement. So in if you are not sure that which ID to be deleted, and the ID will be passed on to the SQL statement from the program logic, then you can just have this format, means use this format, so that while the pointer comes into the place where the SQL statement is being stored in the string, so it will automatically take up the value in the question mark, which comes as uh, this the value which is a result of your program logic. And then when you do a prepare, then you'll have to use this host variable, which which contains your SQL statement. And while executing, you can use the variable which holds the dynamic value which needs to be substituted into your SQL statement. So this is one kind of a dynamic SQL execution method. And the next one will be, you can either use directly the variable which will form your whole of the SQL statement, and it will be in a character format being substituted into a character string. And then you can directly prepare the statement to be converted into this executable format using that particular variable which is holding the SQL statement, and just execute it from the prepared name. So the prepare statement syntax is prepare keyword and the name of the preparation of statement, and then you'll have to use a from keyword where you can mention the host variable or the string variable where you are storing the SQL statements, and then you can execute that directly. Now, one other method is, if you are not preparing that statement and directly you can execute it. So for that, you'll have to first uh, place the formatted SQL statement into a string variable, and then you can use execute immediate. In this case, when you use an execute immediate, the string need not to be converted into a executed SQL statement. Rather, it will just pick up from the string variable which holds the statement of the SQL as in. Okay. So this is another method of executing an SQL statement. And in the fixed format, as I've shown in this, we have, first of all, statement is a select statement which will pass the value of ID and name, where the ID is 009. It will substitute into the host variables, and this particular include statement will also work, which has a condition of where ID is equal to 008. For that record, it will substitute the ID and name into the host variable. So if you want to try it out how it works, then you'll have to take it into debug, and I'll show you how it works. STPG. Now, if you call this program, it comes into this statement, and if we execute it, press F10, then you can see what is the value been stored in ID field. It will be, the name is 9, the ID stored is 009. So as you have seen that the member SQSTMT was fetching these particular columns based on the ID of 008. So if I'll just execute and press F10, and then if you want to see what is the value been retrieved, you can just evaluate and see that the eighth record has been retrieved. And this is how you can use and include within an SQL. So this was all about a simple SQL statements execution. So in order to means read a file and do program logic on each of the records based on any conditions, we use cursors. Now, what cursors do is it will create, we'll first have to declare a cursor. For that, I'll just open this sample and show you how it's been done. So the format is you have to first declare a cursor from an SQL statement so that this cursor name will hold this particular statement to be executed later in the process. So the format is declare cursor name and the cursor, the for keyword appears, and after the for keyword, your SQL statement will be there. And after a cursor has been created, you have to open the cursor so as to retrieve records based on the SQL statement. Without opening a cursor, you cannot do a fetch statement which will just retrieve records for you in the program. So after opening the cursor, open and the cursor name is the format syntax. Then you start reading from the cursor. Now to read, what we do is we use a fetch statement. Now fetch statement for a static cursor which is not scrollable means a simple cursor is fetch. Either you can see first or next or directly use fetch the cursor name and into the variable where you want to push the values been retrieved from that SQL statement. So basically the host variables are used in the fetch statement. Since we are using a fetch next from, which is mostly used with the scroll cursors and means the dynamic cursors, you can say, not the static ones. So here we have mentioned this whole syntax of the fetch. In another case, you can see I have mentioned the scroll keyword here. Now, the importance of a scroll keyword is that here you have seen that you can either do a you can just do a fetch next or fetch first, but using a scroll cursor what you can do is you can fetch from the last of the entire data set which has been retrieved. Fetch from last as in you'll have to mention fetch last so that if the data set been retrieved has records like 1, 2, 3, 4 in sequence, then the last record which is there in the sequence will be picked up, and then you can go from the last to the top of the data set that has been that will be retrieved from the SQL statement. So this is an equivalent to setgt and readp that we use in our normal RPGLE. In this also you can see the same format has been used, which is a declare cursor name. Now the scroll keyword comes before the cursor keyword, and then the for keyword, and then the executable SQL statement, and then we'll open the cursor, we'll fetch it, and then based on the success of the read, which is fetch, we'll do the rest of the logic, which is either display it or do any of the calculations, and after that we'll again do a fetch. Now the scroll cursor also has this feature to access relative of the record, relative record as in let's say we have a table uh, with the column as column. Okay. Now the table is having a column. We'll just use which is having data as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. Okay. Now, if we are declaring a cursor for select star from this table, and then we are opening the cursor, and if we do a fetch relative of 3, as you can see in the sample here, I have taken relative of 5. Then what it will do is it will pick up the fifth record, means in relation to the data set been pulled up from the SQL query, it will fetch the fifth record in relative to the first record for that particular condition in the SQL statement, and it will keep on fetching the relative of fifth if we'll just use that within a do while loop. And so the result set which it will give is I'll show you what the records in the test pf file. So it is in sequence of 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12. Okay, now this example also shows how we can fetch multiple rows at once by using this for and number of rows in the fetch statement. And for fetching multiple rows, you'll have to use a array data structure in that case. So it is, since we are fetching 5 rows at once, so this data structure is having a dimension of 5, and it will, since we are doing a fetch relative of 5, so from the data that I have shown in the test PF, it will directly fetch the fifth record at first, and then the 5 records from here in, since we are fetching 5 rows at once. So this will our first fetch, and the next fetch will be the relative of 5, which is this one, then plus 1 2 3 4 5. The next fetch will start from 10th, and then it will go on till 14th. So this is how it is going to work. I'll show you in some time. The another part I have shown is, I've already told about this putting a SQL statement into a string, and then how we can just prepare and execute it. Rather to read record based on the SQL statement, you can just do a prepare, and after that, without executing, you can declare a cursor from that particular string which contains the SQL statement, and then you can use this open cursor where you'll have to provide the host variable name, since it's a dynamically uh, it will be used dynamically, the condition will be used dynamically, and then you can do a fetch as well, and the fetch will be the same as have seen before, fetch from the cursor into a host variable. Now since it has 2 columns at once and we have used star, that's why we are using a data structure res, which has 2 fields, field 1 and field 2. It is having all those samples. I'll just take it in debug and show you how it is working. Since we are using an update or insert commands here, so that's why we will do an update production as start yes and then debug. So the first one is count star. We are just taking the count of the records from test p. So after just running it, you can see that it already holds the count. If it would have been if the SQL statement would have failed, then the SQL code would have been different and not 0, and the count would not have been populated with the value that it has been populated with. So when it was a successful run, the SQL code was 0, then it displayed the count. The next step is the when our you have seen that our test PF is having multiple records, but will just retrieve the ID and name without any condition. So what it will do is it will fetch multiple records, but it will substitute the first record from the data set into our field 1 and field 2 host variables. So if I'll just execute it and will check the SQL code, it will show that it is not a successful execution, means it has returned some issues. Now, if you try to check what are the values been stored here, you can see that it has retrieved for the first row returned, and it has substituted those values into the host variables. However, the SQL code is not 0. Now, to handle that and see what error that it has captured, I have used this diagnostics command. Now, what get diagnostic does is, whenever you are executing any SQL query, you can write get diagnostics after that, so that it will capture what has means if it's a successful execution, or it will just or if an error encountered, then the text of the error encountered will be stored in the host variable been mentioned. So the syntax for this is get diagnostics, and then you'll have to specify condition space one, and then the host variable and the message text. So this is for substituting the text message of the execution that has been done in the prior statement. So if I'll just execute it, it will show what is the error happened here. So it shows that the result of select was more than one row, but still it has stored the first row returned from the result set. You'll see that it already had displayed. Now we'll come to the cursors. So this has been declared as a cursor. Now we'll just open it. I'll hit F10. So after open it, it will fetch the first record from the data set into our data structure, which is res, and eval res. You can see the first record has been inserted into the res data structure. Now the SQL code has been returned as 0, then it will come inside the loop and it will display. So to maintain this loop, what we are doing is we have conditioned it over the SQL code. And whenever the SQL code is 0, we'll process the logic. And prior to the undo, we'll just again place a fetch next, so that it will see if the fetch statement is successful, then it will again go and check here the SQL code will be 0 if for a successful execution, and then again it will do the program logic that we have specified over here. So it again goes and checks if the SQL code is 0, then it was a successful fetch, then it will again display for the next, which is 2. So we have 23 records here. I'll just place the breakpoint over and let it process till this part. So it is the same, just using the scroll keyword here. It will also display the same result set. So the first fetch has been done. If you want to see what is there in the res, you can see here it was 1, and then it will go uh, up till 23rd record. Now here what I have done is I have used the row count that has been returned. So in get diagnostics, you can also check what is the row count been retrieved from the previously executed SQL command. So since this fetch has returned one row, and that's why it will be having a value of 1, and I have based the condition for the do while upon that. So it will again display till the 23rd record. We'll get to the next part and let it process till then. Now here we are actually using the feature of a scroll cursor by using fetch last and fetch prior. Without using a scroll cursor, you cannot use this fetch last or fetch prior or fetch relative. So this program will only get compiled if you are just pushing this part of the code in a program only when the cursor has been declared as scroll. So this is the functionality of scroll cursor. So if I'll fetch from the last into res, so as you know that there were 23 records, and if I'll try to, sorry, if I'll try to display the result set which has been fetched, I'll take F11 here. You can see the last record has been fetched. Skill code is 0. I'll just display it. Now the fetch prior has been executed after that, so it will contain 22. So if you'll also keep it in a do while loop, uh, condition based on the condition of the SQL code is 0, and you'll place a undo here, and prior to the undo, if you are placing this command for fetch prior, then it will go on reading from the last till the top of the record. Now the one which I was talking about, the relative one. So here we are fetching 5 rows at once. So if I'll open this cursor and fetch relative of 5, then from the table that you have seen, run query test pf. So this is the record set. Now if I'm first fetching it as a relative of fifth record, then the fifth record will get fetched into the host variable. Since we are doing a multiple row retrieve, so the 5 records from this pointer will get fetched and will get stored in our array data structure. So if I'll take F10 here, and execute this diagnostics command so as to see how many rows have been returned, you can see the result count is 5. 5 rows has been returned from this fetch statement, and the same is placed in the data structure as a host variable 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So and then within your loop you can use how to access those records from the data structure and then work upon them, place a program logic based on that, and do your calculations. I'll just put a breakpoint here, pass this. Now the example of preparing or declaring cursor from a string. Down. Okay. So here I am placing a value of 006 in a variable of id num, which we'll be using later for execution of means preparing and declaring the cursor dynamically. So the string has been created, and if you want to see what's the value been substituted here, you can see the string substituted has been the SQL statement with the question mark at the place where our dynamic value will get substituted. Now we'll be preparing the statement from that string, and the declare has happened. Now while opening the cursor, we'll be using the value which we need to place in uh, the SQL statement, where we are allowing a dynamic value to be substituted. After opening the cursor, you can then fetch. Now since we are fetching for id of 006, if I press F10, and then you can see the value retrieved is the 6th record. Now fetching from a dynamic cursor directly without using any string statements as such, means without using any string variables. So we'll be directly using SQL statement in the declare cursor part, where we will mention the host variable, which will be dynamically allocated based on the program logic uh, existing previously. And then we will just open that cursor. Since we are using a host variable, we do not need to use the particular variable in the open statement here. So it will directly take the value and declare the cursor based on all of the statement. So the 007 value will be assigned here itself while declaring the cursor. After opening, if we will fetch, then you can see the 7th record has been retrieved. Again, I'm checking if SQL code is 0, I'll just display it and close the cursor. Now, whenever you open a cursor, make sure you close the cursor after the operations have been completed for that particular cursor. Now we'll just see how an insert statement works. So in this case, since we are having two columns in test PF, you can either use two fields and then use them as colon field one and then comma, then colon field two, as you have seen in the interactive session on how we were inserting the records, single record at a time. And the same can be done either, or else you can use the data structure that on how I have used it here. So I've been using a single dimension data structure, or you can say a normal data structure, which is having two subfields, having data type and length same as the column, which is contained in this uh, file where we'll be inserting the values. So if I'll just execute it, so the data will get inserted. Now the insertion data is 20, and you can also check that by doing a run query on test pf bottom. So after the 23rd record, which was the last, we have inserted a 20th named record, and again we'll be trying for insertion using a string. Now what happens is in SQL RPG, if you substitute any SQL statement into a string variable, then while evaluating that variable to see what is the string format being stored, it will show up to a length of 1024 only. So make sure that if you are using any string variable of length more than 1024, and to see what is the value, means what is the SQL statement that has been stored in the string, then you'll have to use eval that string name, and then you can use a colon symbol, then C, which will symbolize a character type, and the length you can specify. Let's say if this string variable has been of length 5000, and I would have substituted a long query over here into that string, which was close to a length of 5000, then we can see, okay, yeah. So just providing C will extend it to 3000 length. Since our string is not of 5000 length, so it is not showing anything and displaying a domain violation error occurred. If you'll see the string length we are using, it will be of 1000 or 1500. Yeah, it's of 1500. So in this case, we can use 1500 directly, so that it will show us what's the value being stored in that variable till 1500 of length. So that's one thing, and that is how you use this command, debug command, to see what's the value being stored till the length that you require to see, which will be more than 1024. Now, as I've told that directly after inserting a value into a character variable, means substituting a SQL statement in the form of directly an executable SQL statement, because we are not preparing it here. We will directly be executing it by using an execute immediate statement. So make sure that it is in the correct format, which can be executed by the preprocessor. So if you'll see here, it is in the correct format. Has it been not in the correct format, then it will not get inserted. Since you can see here one colon is missing, so it will not get executed properly, and 21 will not get inserted into our table. It will return a error. After executing it, if you'll see a run query, do a bottom, you'll see that the last inserted record was 20 and the 21 has not been inserted. And to check why it had happened, you can again use that get diagnostics command here. Get diagnostics and the text message, it will show you that what exactly error has happened, why it has not been inserted. The next is deleting records without using cursor. So deleting record without using cursor is directly issuing a delete command. So the same step like we were doing for the insert, we'll just prepare it from the string where it where the SQL statement has been stored with a question mark which allows for a dynamic value to be inserted while doing an execute. So in the execute statement, you can see that I've used this host variable, whose value will be substituted in the question mark, which is there in the whole of the SQL statement, and then it will be executed. So if I'll be executing this, then the 21th record will get deleted. So you can see the 21st record has been deleted. And if again I try to do the same, means deleting the 21st record again, it will be throwing error which you can directly check from evaluating the SQL code, which is 100 means it haven't found anything, means anything with that condition which is id equals to 21 and have reached the end of file, which signifies SQL code is 100. After that we'll be updating or deleting using a cursor. So now for update or delete using a cursor, you'll have to declare a cursor and then read the records in a sequential manner. Since we are not using a scroll cursor, we have not mentioned the for update of keyword here. Yeah. So in case we would have been using a scroll cursor here, it would have been mandatory to use this particular part, means the field which we need to update, we'll have to mention after the skill statement that for update of that particular field. So it is not mandatory if we are not using a scroll cursor. I'll show you with in the next example how it works. Means how it is not mandatory with the scroll cursor. In this example, you'll just focus on how this update is happening. Okay. So for updating it, we'll just fetch it one by one. Since we have not used fetch first from or fetch last, uh, because it's a not a cursor, we have not used fetch last or fetch prior. We are directly using a simple fetch from cursor into our fields, and you'll check if the SQL code is 0. And for all the ID numbers that are stored in the field, we are picking it up in the variable of field one, and then we are checking if that ID is divisible by 5, and it will give the remainder as 0. Then only will update for that particular record. Since the field one has a value of 1, the remainder will not be 0 in this case, and then that's why it didn't get into this loop. So I'll directly place the breakpoint over here and process it till here. Now the field 1 is having a value of 5. So 5 divisible by 5 will get a remainder of 0, and then we can use update. And the update, how the update works is, you'll have to provide this part of the update statement, and then you'll have to use where current of cursor name, the cursor that you have declared for retrieval of these records. So here the cursor name was 10, and that's why I have mentioned where current of 10, so that the current record which is held up by the fetch statement, it will get updated. The name will get updated, which has been mentioned in the keyword here for update of. This is a name field which needs to get updated. That's why. And if I press F10 for this, and you can see what the text it has pushed from the get diagnostics, which is one row updated in the file. And the same you can see by querying the file itself. So for the fifth record, you can see the name is changed to updated. For the 10th record, the same will happen. The 15th record, the same will happen. Now for delete operation. So prior to updating the 10th record, we'll encounter the 7th record in the fetch operation. So for the 7th record, I'll just place the breakpoint here, process it till here. You can see the field been retrieved as the 7th record, and for deleting the same, we'll have to provide in the where condition, where will be the current of the cursor. So it will get deleted. Now, if we need to query the file to verify data, you can see the 7th record has been deleted. So this will happen till the 23rd record, and the last that we have inserted previously, that by mentioning the ID as 20. So I'll just place the breakpoint after this whole process, or in the close cursor statement, and then remove the breakpoints from here for them to process as it is. And to verify at the end, you can just see that the fifth has been, the name has been changed. For the 10th record, name has been changed. For the 15th, the name has been changed. For the 20th, the name has been changed. And so is the 7th record deleted, the 14th record deleted, which is multiple of 7, and same for 21st, it has been deleted. Now for inserting multiple record at once. So for that, I have used a multi-dimension data structure. So in the top, you can see the RES ARR specifies that it has a dimension of 5. It can hold 5 records at once, 5 data sets, sorry, not records. And the data sets will be including the subfields of field 1 and field 2, which are having the same attributes as of the columns in the test PF where we'll be inserting. So I'll just substitute the value of field 1 here as the number of the iteration. So it will contain 1. The field 2 will contain insert and then 1. And similarly, I'll just populate the data structure first. Now, if you need to see what the data structure holds, do an eval on that. You can see the first record will be having value of the first data set is having 1 for first field and insert 1 for second, and the same goes on for till the fifth of the sub record, means data set, fifth data set of the data structure. And since we are inserting all those at once, so after the file name in the insert command will specify how many number of rows to be inserted. So it will be 5 in our case, and then the number of rows. So rather than using a hard-coded value of 5, you can use a host variable here, and you can pass the value in the host variable as 5 in the program logic before it. Now this will allow us to insert 5 rows at once, and the text will display as 5 rows inserted in the file. This was about the sample program and the different type of uh, usage of structures, sorry, usage of cursors. Now we have this delete cursor program where I am using a sensitive type and for deletion of a record. Now what happens is there are two types of cursors. One is of sensitive type and one is of insensitive type. So the difference between them is for an insensitive cursor, you won't be able to run an update from the cursor or delete from the cursor. And for for a sensitive type, the update or delete will run from the cursor. Uh, if you are using direct statement of update without using a cursor, then an insensitive cursor will also work in that case. Not an issue because it will just be used to read the records, and you will be creating your statement, SQL statement of update or delete into a string and then executing it. So it doesn't matter if it is working that way. It will only matter, the insensitive and sensitive will only matter where you have been trying to update the table record using the cursor itself. So here, as I've told that if you are not using a scroll keyword, it is not mandatory to use the for update of and then the field name for which the update should be happening or the delete will be happening. So if a delete is just to be executed from the cursor, then no need to mention for update of that particular field name because no particular field we are using for that case. And okay, so I'll just first show you the structure of this SenseP. Now the structure of this file contains these columns, the 6 columns for status, ID, name, department, phone, and mail ID. So what is in the program logic is if a status is not equal to A for each retrieved row, then we'll be deleting it. So let's try to update any of the status or any record as I. Let's update for these 2 records as I. Okay. So we'll just use upddt rather than query. You hit a page down so that the existing records will come up and a page down, page down. So we'll just use this 3rd record. We'll just inactivate it. The status will be inactive, inactive. The 5th record as well inactive, and then we hit enter. Take F3. It will ask if the end of date entry has occurred. Yes, then it will be saved. The changes will be saved. You can see that the status of the 3 records has been inactivated. And then if I try to take this in debug mode, debug I'll have to do first. dbg the program, since we are using a delete operation there, we'll do a update production as star yes, the breakpoint, and then call it. This case again we are retrieving the information of how many rows been retrieved, so it will show as 1 row retrieved for the 1 fetch, and it will check if the status for that row retrieved is not equal to A, it will delete. So it's the 1st record, so it had the status of A, then it will go on fetching for the next record. For the next record, again, the status was A. For the 3rd record, okay, what happened here? First fetch, next fetch. Mhm. This fetch is causing error. The same way, we can directly use a text to see what exactly has the error been posted. The row count doesn't works with the condition one being specified. Not sure what is happening here. I'll tell you about that later. For the yeah, I was talking about the sensitive and the insensitive ones. So for insensitive, if you try to use an update, so it won't update. In this case, means it won't compile at all. For that, if you try to see what's the compilation error for that, and it will show you that for update clause is not valid since it's an insensitive cursor. And it is how it works for an insensitive cursor, as I've already told. So I think I have com covered all of the things. Yep, things have been covered. Yeah, Natik, we can conclude this session here.
Yes, so thank you others for such a great session on SQL statements.
So today is the last session, and hoping for the best. So we'll meet in clinical call. So good luck. Bye bye. Take care. Thank you.